All right, good morning, everybody. I think we are all now live and in action. Hopefully the audio is working as well. That obviously makes these things a lot better when you can actually hear me as opposed to just seeing me. But more importantly, you want to see what's going on with now Tropical Storm Nicole. For the last day or so, we've been calling it Subtropical Storm Nicole. Now we've pushed the sub out to the side, and now we're calling it fully tropical now that the thunderstorms have started to really burst there towards the center of the storm, and that's where the focus for a lot of the stronger winds are going to be closer to the center of the storm. So let's get right to it here. Let me show you the latest that just came down from the National Hurricane Center. This is now the 10 o'clock advisory. So now that as we get into November and that time change, that pesky change back to not daylight, but standard time, we're going to get these updates now at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the next intermediate advisory will come at 1 o'clock this afternoon. No change in strength, though it did change from a subtropical to now tropical storm, but wind speeds are at 50 miles per hour. The storm has also started to get influenced by the ridge of high pressure to the north, which is ultimately going to push it a little bit farther south, but now just a westerly heading, if not a little bit of a west-southwesterly heading, now at 9 miles per hour. About 350 miles northeast of the northwestern Bahamas. So you kind of see now it's tracking generally to the west, and it'll start to turn toward the Bahamas before it really begins to pull to the northwest and head up towards Cape Canaveral here. A couple of updates here from at least last night. The entire 10 Tampa Bay area is underneath a tropical storm watch. So that tropical storm watch came down at 4 o'clock this morning, and now everybody in the Bay Area included in that tropical storm watch. Meanwhile, the Orlando area is under a tropical storm warning, and Cape Canaveral and much of the east central coast of Florida now underneath a hurricane warning. So they're within that 36-hour period for when they're going to expect those hurricane conditions. Something that just came down from the Hurricane Center is a storm surge watch now in effect for our Nature Coast. So that includes Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus County. Not a huge threat, but certainly going into Thursday night into Friday morning as the winds begin to shift on the backside of the storm, as the storm begins to move away from us, we could see some small surge. So the greater storm surge will be over on the East Coast, where they could see between 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. Meanwhile, here locally in the Bay Area, we could see between 1 to 2 feet of storm surge. And then surge is just basically saying 1 to 2 feet above normal tide levels, and then between 2 to 4 feet of those above normal tide levels up there through the Nature Coast. So not looking like anything close to what Ian produced on either coast, but here in the Bay Area, as the winds begin to shift, which I'll show you in just a second, we could see that water being pushed up along our coast to be a little bit higher than normal. Here's the latest forecast cone from the Hurricane Center. We've seen a slight shift to the north in that track. Now, I do want to point out, this is an important thing to point out here. Notice how the cone, right? It kind of bisects the area, where the southern part of our area technically not in the cone, but the impacts are still going to be well beyond where the cone is. So you might start to hear people say, oh, well, I'm not even in the cone, I don't need to worry about this. There's still going to be impacts well beyond the cone. Those tropical storm force winds extend out very far from the center. In fact, I haven't checked, but I'll check right now and see the latest advisory that just came down from the Hurricane Center. They're saying that those tropical storm force winds extend out 380 miles from the center of Nicole. So that is a huge reach for those tropical storm conditions to be felt. In fact, let me see here if I can pull that up. I could even show that to you, which would be great, I know. Let's try this here. Okay, so I mentioned tropical storm force winds extending out 380 miles from the center of the storm. So even as we go into Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, even though the center of the storm will be well off the East Coast still, we could begin to feel those tropical storm force winds arriving 4, 5, 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. And those are going to be gusts within some of the bands, those outer rain bands that start to move into eastern Polk County, eastern Hillsborough County through Wednesday evening. And then as we head through Wednesday night, Thursday morning, we'll likely begin to see more of those tropical storm force gusts with the potential for some near hurricane force gusts through the Orlando area, Cape Canaveral, Daytona Beach. But it looks like the strongest of the wind gusts really don't move into our area, maybe potentially clipping eastern Citrus County. But by Thursday afternoon, certainly by Thursday night, those conditions, those tropical storm force winds will be moving to the north, and we'll see improved conditions here across the Bay Area as we go through the day on Friday. Here's the latest cone. This is what I was going to show you and talking about that slight shift to the north. So we have seen the forecast trend has been to shift the center of the storm at least to the north, which would obviously mean the strongest of those winds, which is going to be closer to the center of the storm, would be slightly shifted to the north as well. Then you see as we go through Friday into Saturday, the storm really races quickly up to the northeast. So the center of it probably moving through much of the Carolinas, up into Virginia, the mid-Atlantic, and then ultimately up into the northeast. Quick look here at those tropical storm force winds and those arrival times. Not a lot of change in this department either. We're still looking at the potential for those tropical storm force winds, if they do move into the region, to be sometime Wednesday night into Thursday morning. The probability of that happening in the Bay Area, 50-50, flip a coin there. And then Orlando, pretty much a guarantee almost that you would see those tropical storm force winds. And then more likely, again, we'll just say likely, in the Cape Canaveral area over towards the Space Coast. So likely seeing that arrive. Let me show you here the timing of all this. This is looking at one of our forecast models, and this gives you a good idea of when we could expect to begin to receive those gusty conditions. You see sustained winds of around 20 to 25 miles per hour through Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, but we could find some stronger wind gusts within some of those rain bands through tomorrow afternoon, more so into tomorrow night. And then we could see some wind gusts approaching 40 to 50 miles per hour, Tampa, St. Pete, and then especially along the water there coming off of the bay in downtown St. Pete, you get a little gusty as well. So we could see some power outages because of those gusty conditions, just maybe knocking down a branch or something like that could take out a power line here or there, but nothing that's going to be widespread, nowhere near the scale of what we saw with Hurricane Ian. But, it could be a little flickery. We could get some flickering lights into Thursday morning, maybe Thursday afternoon as well. But the center of the storm looks like it could be clearing the coast, or at least clearing out of the area through Thursday night. Now, still a bit breezy through Thursday night as well. Notice how those winds start to come in out of the west, however, through Wednesday, or rather Thursday night. So looking at Thursday night, those winds starting to shift out of the west-southwest, that would push some water into the bay. That's where we could see that 1 to 2 foot storm surge, or just higher than normal water levels in the bay. And then the same thing up in the Nature Coast. That's why they've got that storm surge watch in effect for Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus County through Thursday into Friday morning, as that wind begins to shift out of the west-southwest, which would then push the water up along the coast. So storm surges along the coast, but we still get some pretty good rainfall with this system. It'll be relatively quick moving. It'll hang around for about 36 to 48 hours. So we could pick up 2 to 4 inches of rain. Let me go back to this here. We could pick up 2 to 4 inches of rain, with maybe some localized areas seeing a little bit more rainfall than that, upwards of maybe 6 inches in some places. So you get a lot of rain over a relatively short period of time. It could result in some flash flooding. So we'll have to watch those conditions to see if we get any training with some of the rainfall. Training meaning that we get rain kind of banding and falling over the same area for a longer period of time. So we'll have to watch those rain conditions, and then the potential for giving us some flooding as we make our way through. Really Thursday afternoon is when we could start to see some of those flooding conditions. Into Friday would be more of a concern for some of the creeks and rivers when those begin to rise after the rain stops and all that water runs off into the creeks, into the streams and rivers. Then we may start to see a couple of spots with some rising water levels there in the rivers and everything. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But aside from that, though, I don't think there's a huge, long-lasting impact here from Nicole. It looks like their greatest threat for receiving the variance of threats would be really between Wednesday afternoon through Thursday morning and maybe a little bit into Thursday afternoon, with some gusty conditions still possible over the northern part of the area. But we could see upwards of 50, maybe 60 mile per hour gusts at times. I don't think the sustained winds could get much higher than about 30 to 35 miles per hour. We'll have to keep an eye on the conditions for the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. I think the bridge has a possibility of closing, and that would likely be into Thursday morning. So we're still waiting to see if any of the school districts do anything with maybe canceling, delaying school. We'll see what happens on Thursday, but Thursday would be the day for those greater, more far-reaching impacts. The rain, the flooding threat would likely come through Thursday afternoon as well. Maybe a couple of tornadoes. We talk about the tornado threat being on that front right quadrant, not necessarily the northeastern quadrant, but the front right quadrant. That would be through Polk County, maybe eastern Pasco County. We'll have to watch for the tornado threat as the storm approaches into Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday night. So we'll see how that plays out into Thursday morning. And then that storm surge threat, backside of the storm, as it starts to clear out and those winds begin to shift to the west, maybe getting a little push of some extra water up along our beaches and up along our coast into Thursday night into Friday morning. Three main takeaways here that I want to leave you guys with before we let you go this morning. So the rain and those tropical storm force wind gusts likely begin to arrive through the day on Wednesday, probably more likely Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday evening. Rainfall total still thinking between 2 to 4 inches. Some places could see more than that. In fact, likely there will be some places that see more than that. It'll be those places that see that threat for some flooding. So we're not talking about that 15 to 20 inches of rain like what we saw with Ian across the area that ultimately led to the days and days and days of the residual flooding that came in a lot of the rivers around the area, especially over Sarasota County, Polk County. So we won't see that, but we still could see some brief flash flooding from some of the rainfall that comes through. And then the conditions begin to improve into Friday. In fact, a Friday afternoon, while it will be a little bit breezy, I think conditions improve pretty quickly into the afternoon. And then on the back side of the system, it clears up very, very nicely to make a fantastic weekend. In fact, let me show you the 7-day forecast here. We'll see rainy day, windy day on Thursday, maybe some lingering rain into Friday morning. We'll have to watch that. We could see some rain kind of moving over the same area through Friday morning, so we'll have to watch for maybe continued flood threat into Friday morning. But after that, Saturday and Sunday look spectacular. 80 on Saturday, lows dip into the 50s Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, low 70s for highs. That's going to be great for watching football Sunday afternoon. So fantastic looking stuff out there by the weekend. We just have to get through this, what will become a hurricane, but for now, just Tropical Storm Nicole. One last look at it here as it starts to head towards the Bahamas. 50 mile per hour tropical storm right now, wind gusts up around 65. So it's strengthening. It'll continue to strengthen with those wind speeds, probably ultimately maybe rounding out up around 75, maybe an 80 mile per hour hurricane before making landfall somewhere near the Space Coast up towards Cape Canaveral sometime early Thursday morning. But that is it for me, guys. Bobby Deskins, Chief Meteorologist Bobby Deskins, is going to be joining everybody for 10 Tampa Bay midday. And he'll have the latest on Nicole there at midday. That starts, well, right at noon. So he is here. He's getting everything updated. He'll be ready for you. And I'm sure they'll be doing more Facebook Lives, YouTube Lives, and everything else live through the rest of the day. You guys take care, stay safe, and we'll keep you posted as more updates come down. But for now, that is all I've got for you. Take care. Have a good one.
And taking the